Can everyone hear me okay? I'm kind of quiet. Thank you two so much for that beautiful music. Carrie just introduced me to them a couple of weeks ago, and it was perfect. I also want to say thanks to all of the librarians here, my amazing colleagues over at Belk, and lots of friends, and my mama, who is visiting from Idaho. I'm just putting her on the spot. We didn't plan it this way, but she was here for all of my spelling bees, so I think this is appropriate. My name is Libby Coyner, and I'm an archivist here at Elon. I work in Belk Library on the second floor. I work primarily with historical documents, but I also encourage people to keep thinking about themselves as creating history, and I encourage them to keep donating archives, so I will make that plug here. And also to think critically about how we tell our history. So I'm going to tell a bit of mine. It's November 2018, Thanksgiving, and I'm making my way to West Virginia, 14 miles past the Virginia border, into a place that no longer supplies a store, post office, or gas station. There's no cell phone service. My pal from graduate school, now working as a librarian in Spartanburg, South Carolina, has agreed to come along for the ride. We prepare for 3 days with 24-degree weather and no running water. This was this week. What was I thinking? We're making our way to the little turn in the road where my father was born, which has been all but abandoned for about 30 years now, save a few old houses that get dusted off and used during hunting season. Clover Lick, unincorporated, is a town along the Greenbrier River, and it declined around the same time that the train stopped running. Today, Clover Lick is mostly in a state of neglect. My cousin maintains one of the houses, always dubbed Cold Comfort Farm in our family, and this is where we will stay. As a kid, there were 2 houses in Clover Lick where family would hang out. Cold Comfort Farm is where the aunties would drink box after box of Franzia and chain smoke cigarettes. I always spent time at the other house, a big old farmhouse which was always a mysterious wonderland of treasures. Go-karts in the barn that we'd swim out to the river and drive off the rock, knitting arranged in baskets to cover up bottles of whiskey. There were distinctly southern things that, as a child of the Pacific Northwest, completely baffled me. A screened-in porch where you could watch fireflies. A sitting room that no one ever seemed allowed to sit in. We climb in the windows of old buildings and liberate the things that were left behind. Mouse-chewed books about anthropomorphized animals or old bottles left behind in the general store. The best find we located is a series of letters between my grandparents in the 1930s and 40s, before she passed away in 1947. He followed 3 years later when my father would have been about 5 years old. So these letters are the only thing that I had as witness to their lives, something that was a proxy to tell their story. I often credit Clover Lick as being my archivist route, the place that made me look for meaning in papers. I visited Clover Lick for the last time at age 10, but with all of the relatives gone, we stopped making the trip. I graduated from high school in Idaho, ran away to Portland, Oregon as soon as I could, where I lived the cliche Portlandia existence. I worked in coffee shops and vintage clothing stores, got certified as a bicycle mechanic, got a bunch of tattoos, and came out as queer. In Portland, it occurred to me that I could actually work with old papers and get paid for it. So I decided to pursue a joint master's degree of library studies and archival studies at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. After that, I moved to Arizona for an internship and ended up staying for real jobs. I worked for nearly 7 years at the State Archives of Arizona and started and dropped out of a PhD program in history, where I was writing about tattoos as personal archives. I'm not sure Clover Lick would have occurred to me much, except that my life took an unexpected turn in 2016. Somewhere in the middle of me doing a ton of bicycle advocacy, helping start a rock and roll camp for girls, and trying to rescue every single cat, I was diagnosed with cancer. Sorry to be a bummer like that. I knew something was wrong for a while, but kept pushing through, hoping someone would finally diagnose me. 3 weeks after I accomplished a bucket list item of riding a century, 120 miles, on my bicycle from Phoenix to Tucson, I sat at an examination table and listened as I was told that At the age of 35, I had colon cancer, the same thing that my grandfather hadn't been able to survive just 2 years before I was born. Waiting for a diagnosis is agony, but once you get diagnosed with the big C, everything begins to happen fast. I was diagnosed on a Thursday by a gastroenterologist. She pulled some strings to get me in with one of the top surgeons, and I was in his office on Tuesday learning about my treatment plan. It involved coordinating 3 different doctors, a radiation oncologist, a medical oncologist for the chemo, and a surgeon. Within a week, I had a port installed. It's this really creepy catheter that's implanted under your skin. There's a tube that is threaded up to put chemo into your big vein. It's really weird. It's like you become this extraterrestrial thing. 2 major things that happened for me during cancer were, first, once the cancer got cut out, my digestive system got rerouted. So I'm trying to learn to live in a new body, but it's also difficult to talk about in front of everybody. The other thing that happened is that radiation sent me into medically induced menopause. So dealing with hot flashes and night sweats became part of the array of symptoms I had to contend with. During this time, I listened to a podcast that has really stuck with me. They said, "I don't understand why older women have not burned this planet down." And I thought, yes. One thing about cancer is that time becomes warped. Sometimes it's a flurry of appointments and a lot of hurrying up and waiting, and other times you can sleep for 10 hours and it feels like the blink of an eye. And other times you're turning over and over in bed for hours, hoping the sweat subsides so you can sleep. And during this time, my mom would mail me fat envelopes of family archives every week. I think she was really cleaning out her basement, is what was happening. I finished cancer treatment in December of 2016, and as soon as I feel like I can think clearly, I start to look for a place to start fresh. I'm tired of the sprawl of Phoenix, and besides, 120-degree days and hot flashes are not a winning combination. So 3 months after finishing chemo, I fly to North Carolina, and somehow meandering my way out of the chemo fog, I convinced you all to give me a job. So after an epic road trip that involved me, my dad and sister, 7 cats, and a tetanus shot in Little Rock, Arkansas, I arrived to Elon and am so happy to have space to clear the noise of the previous year. I spend a lot of time at home, grow a garden, establish a safe bike route to work, and promise myself that I will not join a board for a year. I did that. I take road trips to the beach, to the mountains, and discover that Clover Lick is just 4.5 hours away. And my cousin in Charlottesville, who I haven't seen in 30 years, plots with me to take a visit to the farm. When we arrive, it's already dark outside. The house has been shut up for months, and it smells exactly how I remember it. This old, musty mothball smell and wood that never fully dries out. We explore some of the old buildings and places that have meant something to the family. In one house, I find school photographs of my sister and I in grade school on the mantle, a house that's been abandoned for 30 years. It was very creepy. We find an old set of Lionel trains from the 40s that I brought back for my dad. What feels so shocking about Clover Lick is it feels completely abandoned. And it reminds me of a favorite episode of another podcast, This American Life. There was this particular episode about these kids who broke into houses in a place called Freedom, New Hampshire. They came across a house that was left in time. It was like people just walked out and no one tended to it. So there was a quote from that has really stuck with me. They said, "The abandonment is melancholy. In a way, it's worse than throwing away, much worse. I can understand one family being obliged to flee or run or abandon, but that nobody else cared. That it was so overwhelmingly abandoned by everybody that nobody cared to pick it up and give it a proper burial." I stand on the porch of the store my grandparents ran when they were living. I can't help but feel a little relief that circumstances led to my dad growing up in the suburbs of DC and not Clover Lick. I think about what it's like to come back to this place now. I feel a tinge of guilt that I benefit from looking pretty straight. I think of how many people I've loved and love, who would feel really unsafe in this place, where there's such a cavalier mixing of alcohol and guns and trucks. We counted 15 Confederate flags between Burlington and Clover Lick, and that's something that I never saw in the West, and it's still pretty jarring. Sometimes growing up we hear that we shouldn't speak ill of the dead. If we don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. And these prevailing beliefs sometimes mean we don't have the ability to think critically about our history. Therefore, we never talk about how public records tell us that my grandfather died of a heart attack at age 47, related to complications caused by chronic alcoholism. In fact, this was news to my dad when I shared the death certificates with him. My grandmother died from the same cause at age 33. Her youngest child was just under 2 years old. We don't talk about how my dad's relatives offered my mom homemade dandelion wine, as she was clearly several months pregnant and didn't seem to understand why she turned it down. In archives, we encounter a lot of contested family history because people tell the story that they want to believe about themselves. Maybe nobody talks about why my grandparents passed away because it's a source of shame and a source of pain. It's legitimate to not want to relive pain by retelling the story. But what if, in an effort to avoid uncomfortable conversations or tarnish any reputations, we hold all that grief in and don't allow folks to process it? Ironically, processing is the same term we use in archives work to talk about how we go through collections, arrange and describe them, and make them available to other people. I am currently processing a collection of letters between my dad's aunt and uncle, who took him in after his parents passed. Letters between Clover Lick and Charlottesville in 1932. And those letters will all go to UVA Special Collections, so I'm very excited. Clover Lick has been a really complicated place to visit, and I'm still learning how my story fits into the overall context, how to reconcile some of the troubling history of my family, and how to take ownership of the problems in our family in an effort to address them more openly. I'm grateful to return to Clover Lick and demystify the place, fill in the gaps in the history, and also honor what it's meant to me. When the last of the relatives, Uncle Bo, passed away, he left my sister and I a sizable piece of land near Clover Lick. Never having been back to the land, we opted to sell it, and it's what paid for my first car and my college education. And it occurs to me now that this strange, weird place that was my archivist route is also the place that provided the opportunity to get there. Thank you.